A crowd of passengers poured out of the international terminal at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The hurried footsteps echoed like a familiar refrain of farewells and reunions. In the midst of the crowd, Federal Agent Naomi Sinclair dragged her small suitcase, letting out a soft sigh. Her 3-day assignment in Washington, D.C. to attend a financial crime conference had ended successfully, but she was exhausted. At 35, Naomi was used to the fast-paced life of an FBI agent, but it was never easy being both a woman and a black person in a world that was still not entirely fair. She wore an elegant gray suit, her hair pulled back into a bun, her face displaying intelligence and determination. Naomi's every move was professional and calm, until the peace was shattered by a shrill scream. "My wallet! Someone took my wallet!" A panicked cry came from a well-dressed white woman, her blonde hair wavy, her expensive high heels clicking on the tile as she turned her head to search. Her eyes, confused, angry, suspicious, flipped across the crowd before stopping. She pointed straight at Naomi. It was her. "She took my wallet." The air froze. The unfounded accusation stabbed Naomi like a knife. The people around her stopped, turning to look. Naomi's eyes widened, not in fear, but in disbelief. She fought to keep her composure, taking a step forward. "Ma'am, you must be mistaken. I didn't." "Don't lie," the woman screamed. "I saw you standing near me. Who else could have taken my wallet?" 3 police officers appeared within minutes. But before the facts could be verified, before Naomi could finish her explanation, the handcuffs were coldly clamped around her wrists. Judgmental gazes followed, whispers, low hisses. "I knew it, it looked suspicious from the start. Even if you're dressed nicely, it's just a facade." The leading police officer, a middle-aged man with a prejudiced look, didn't need proof. For him, Naomi's skin color and the accusations from a well-dressed white woman were enough. Naomi was pushed against the wall amid the murmurs of the crowd. Humiliation burned inside her. She didn't scream, didn't struggle. The discipline ingrained in her blood kept her still, her eyes looking straight ahead, her voice calm. "I'm a federal agent. My papers are in my jacket pocket." The police officer sneered, thinking it was a hopeless excuse. But when he rummaged through Naomi's pocket and pulled out her FBI badge, all 3 policemen fell silent. Their faces paled. The air seemed thick with an uncomfortable silence. The white woman took a step back. An airport worker ran up, panting. excuse me, we just found her purse, under the seat in the waiting area." All eyes turned again. No one spoke. No one apologized. Naomi straightened. She didn't shout, she didn't curse. She just looked deeply into each person's eyes, letting her silence do the talking. It wasn't just a personal insult. It was a vivid demonstration of the prejudice, still persistent, still taken for granted, that skin color could make someone suspect, regardless of reason or truth. Naomi walked away, her hands still red from the handcuffs, but her heart didn't break. She knew she had to tell this story, not for revenge, but to wake up. Naomi Sinclair wore a neat business outfit, slim black slacks and a crisp gray vest that hugged her slim but dignified figure. Her long, straight black hair was like silk, falling lightly over her shoulders, swaying slightly with each steady step. Her face was gentle, with a quiet yet distant beauty. Her makeup was minimal, just a touch of brown eyeshadow and pale pink lipstick, enough to make an impression, not too flashy. She carried a plain brown leather briefcase and a small silver suitcase, a minimalist yet elegant design that would easily move through the busy corridors of the airport. The crowd around her, mostly business travelers, moved with purpose. Naomi was no different. She was used to airports, to reading people's moods through their eyes, their posture, their footsteps. Her eyes scanned the space, unconsciously but accurately, a habit from her job that made her assess the situation like a mental scanner. The line began to slow as they approached the area outside Gate A. Naomi paused, her eyes following a young couple whispering something to a baby in a stroller. Then a scream. A sharp sound that tore through the air. Close to where Naomi stood. Oh my God. No. Where's my wallet? The one who screamed was a white woman, in her 60s. Her outfit was distinctly designer, a Chanel tweed jacket, Prada sunglasses perched on her carefully curled blonde hair, and a large burgundy Hermes Birkin bag that she was frantically rummaging through. Her name was Eleanor Holloway, a name that sounded like it came straight out of a gallery or a Sotheby's auction. Her face was hard with panic and anger. Her eyes darted, like a wolf searching for prey, until they landed on Naomi, the only black woman nearby. The moment lasted less than a second, but it was enough for Mrs. Holloway's deep suspicion to rise. Without thinking, without proof. It was you. It was you, she cried, her voice shrill, trembling, but determined. Her diamond ring finger was pointed at Naomi like an accusing blade. You walked past me. You took my wallet. Give it back. Where's security? Where's the police? Naomi was stunned. It was like a bucket of cold water had been thrown in her face in the middle of winter. She stood there, her whole body tensed. Before she could process what had just happened, she was the target of a public accusation. She took a deep breath. Her voice was calm when she spoke, though her heart was pounding inside. Ma'am, there must be some mistake. I didn't take anything from you. Maybe you should check your pockets. But her words fell on deaf ears. No one in her panic wanted to be rational. Mrs. Holloway shook her head vigorously, still pointing at Naomi, tears starting to well up in her eyes, either from fear or from the humiliation of being robbed. I know people like you. You look nice, you dress like an intellectual, but you're just a thief. Every gaze in the area was on Naomi. No one said anything, but their eyes said it all, suspicion, caution, and some, cold to the point of fear. Naomi stood still. She didn't run. She didn't cry. But inside, something broke, silently and painfully. Get her. The scream tore through the already noisy space of the airport, pushing the chaos to a new level. Passengers turned around in surprise, some took out their phones, ready to record the hot moment that they had no idea about. That hasty, emotional cry quickly attracted the attention of 3 police officers patrolling nearby. Leading the way was Police Officer Dave Rohr, a white man in his late 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a hard face that looked experienced. But behind that tough shell was something arrogant, an overconfidence that his cold eyes did not hide. Right behind was Police Officer Kevin Riley, a young man new to the profession, his bewildered eyes still filled with the confusion of his first days in contact with the thorny reality. Accompanying them was Maria Sanchez, the only female officer in the group. In her 30s, her appearance was sharp and professional, hard-edged but still sympathetic. The 3 of them moved quickly toward the gathering crowd, where a middle-aged white woman, Mrs. Holloway, was shaking, angry and confused, pointing at a black woman standing in front of her, Naomi. Naomi stood straight, her arms loose but her eyes alert. Her face was deliberately calm, but the tightness of her lips and the tension of her shoulders betrayed the anger and anxiety she was swallowing. What's going on here? Officer Rohr's voice rang out, not quite loud but firm and weighty. His eyes swept over Mrs. Holloway, dressed, her voice broken with anger, and then settled on Naomi, as if he had determined each person's role in this play. Thank goodness you're here in time, Mrs. Holloway said, almost with relief. She took my wallet. Right after we got off the plane. There was cash, credit cards, get her back, please. Her voice was full of emotion, as if there was no room for doubt. Her eyes were red, her breathing was rapid, shaking like someone who had just gone through a shock. Without checking, without asking, without looking, Officer Rohr almost immediately turned to Naomi, and his voice became cold as steel. You heard what she said. Give me the wallet. Now. Don't make us have to resort to drastic measures. A short beat passed, the air was still. Naomi took a deep breath. Anger was boiling in her chest, boiling. The sense of injustice, of being convicted without evidence, based on skin color and prejudice, almost choked her. "Officer," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes flashing with pain and anger, "I didn't take anything from anyone. This is a huge misunderstanding. You can check the security cameras at the gate, or have her check my belongings. I am completely innocent." Her composure, instead of being recognized, made Roar smirk. He tilted his head, his voice mocking. "Oh my, this is the same old show. You think I haven't seen it before? Pretend to be calm, pretend to be innocent, then disappear when we're not looking." Kevin Riley looked at Roar with a hesitant look in his eyes, while Maria Sanchez frowned, her eyes darting from Naomi to Mrs. Holloway, as if considering. She began to take a few steps back, looking towards the information desk, where she could request to review the recording. Naomi stood there, surrounded by prejudice, power, and scrutiny. But she did not bow her head. Because the truth is still on her side. And this time, she won't allow herself to be crushed under the heels of hasty judgments and skin color. International Airport, the lobby is noisy and tense. Naomi is just waiting to board her flight, dressed casually but neatly. She ignores the glances that pass by her, because she is used to them, the wariness, the implicit suspicion that people of color often receive in luxury spaces like this. A shout rings out from behind. A man shouts. "My wallet. Someone's picking my pocket." Attention immediately turns to her, Naomi, as if everyone else in the lobby agrees without words. A blonde woman screams. "I saw her standing near him. It was her." Mrs. Holloway confirms it. A few minutes later, 2 security officers appear. A uniformed, muscular man, Officer Roar, leads the way, followed by Riley and Sanchez. Roar steps forward as if he has found the culprit. He pointed at Naomi and said in a contemptuous tone. "Stand still. You are under suspicion of being involved in theft." Naomi backed away slightly, her voice calm but firm. "I have done nothing wrong. You have no reason to accuse me, other than speculation and the color of my skin." Roar narrowed his eyes, his expression cold. "Oh, right. That's the racist chant again. Criminals always have a good excuse." Naomi looked straight at him, her eyes blazing. "You are making baseless accusations, officer. And you are demeaning me not only because of the color of my skin but also because of your own arrogance. I demand that you conduct yourself professionally and respect my civil rights." The air in the lobby seemed to freeze. Nearby passengers turned their heads, silent, listening. Riley glanced at Roar, and Sanchez frowned but remained silent. There was something in Naomi's voice that made them waver, the calm, the dignity, the suppressed pain. But it was that which made Roar angry. "Professional," he roared. "You dare lecture me about civil rights? A person like you has no rights. You should know your place. Even the way you dress shows that you are trying to fool someone. You are part of the rebels, nothing more." Naomi was speechless. The words, uttered in public, were like 100 knives stabbing at her dignity. But she did not bow. She only said, softly but firmly. "You are talking to an innocent person." Roar glanced quickly at Riley and Sanchez. "Put her in handcuffs. Theft and resisting arrest. Take her away." "No." Naomi snapped. "I did nothing wrong. You have no evidence. This is abuse of power." But her resistance, though justified, only made things worse. Riley and Sanchez, with hesitant eyes, stepped forward. Naomi tried to keep her cool, tried not to react in a way that would hurt her more. But when they touched her arms, her instinct to defend herself kicked in, not to attack, but to preserve some dignity. The struggle took place in the middle of the airport lobby, in front of dozens of pairs of eyes and countless phones. Naomi was thrown to the floor. The cold feel of the floor, the clang of metal, the snap of handcuffs behind her back were sounds she would never forget. Her wrists stung. But what hurt more was the gazes on her, not out of sympathy, but because they thought she was a criminal. No one asked, no one needed to know she was innocent. Because she was a woman of color. And in that moment, that was enough to convict her. Mrs. Holloway stood there, her arms crossed, her cold eyes glancing over Naomi as if she were some lowly criminal who had just been exposed to the light of justice. A half-smile was on her face, a smile that was certain that the truth had won, that she was the last one in the game. Naomi, her wrists locked behind her back, raised her head to look at her. She said nothing, but her eyes, that eyes, were a blade. A thin, sharp, silent blade. Mrs. Holloway returned the look with a triumphant look, as if to say, I've seen hundreds of you. Don't think you can fool me. Roar, the police officer, pointed, his voice low but full of pleasure, dripping bitter bile into her ear. Now let's see if you can still talk loudly in the police station. People like you need to be locked up, so no one has to worry about being robbed again. He turned to the two officers with him. Take her away. Naomi gritted her teeth. She swallowed back the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes. Not out of fear, but because she knew this was wrong. She knew she had to do something. This couldn't end like this. Riley and Sanchez moved closer. They were about to escort Naomi away when Roar suddenly raised his hand, stopping her. Wait, he said, as if remembering something, or maybe he just wanted to prolong her humiliation. We have to find hard evidence. She couldn't have hidden her wallet anywhere. Sanchez, you do it. He gestured for the female officer to approach Naomi. It was unclear whether it was out of protocol or because Roar himself wanted to avoid touching someone he was accusing like the plague. Sanchez stepped forward, her expression hesitant. She glanced at Naomi, a little embarrassed. But then, like a programmed machine, she began to check Naomi's coat pockets. Naomi stood still, not resisting. She didn't struggle, didn't plead, just stared into space, her face cold to the point of fear. Sanchez's fingers touched something hard, wrapped in leather. She frowned, then carefully pulled it out, a black leather wallet. Not a wallet. It was small, compact, sturdy, like an administrative item. She opened it. Inside, under the clear plastic, there was no money, no credit cards. Just a shiny gold badge, meticulously engraved with an eagle and emblazoned with the words, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Right next to it was official FBI identification, with Naomi's picture, her full name. Special Agent Naomi Sinclair. The air in the orderly hallway seemed to have been drained. Sanchez froze, as if someone had punched her in the chest. Her hands shook slightly. She looked at the badge, then at Naomi. The handcuffed brunette stood there, not a thief. Not a suspect. Not her. A federal agent. Naomi's eyes slowly turned to Mrs. Holloway. The smile on her face was now a crack. No longer triumphant, but petrified. Naomi slowly held up her purse, the light in the room glinting off the shiny metal inside. A badge. An FBI badge. The entire room seemed to freeze. Elena was the first to see. Her eyes were wide open, almost falling out of their sockets, her lips moving but no words came out. She turned to her two colleagues, Roar and Riley, whose faces were pale and bloodless. "Boss," she exclaimed, her voice trembling like the cold winter wind, "Look, look. She pointed at Naomi. She has an FBI badge." Roar and Riley froze at the same time. They walked slowly closer, as if drawn forward by an invisible force. Their eyes locked on the metal badge, clearly engraved with the words, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The atmosphere changed for a brief moment, but long enough to tear through all the masks. The arrogance, the triumphant smugness Roar had displayed moments before, vanished. Riley was no longer the smirking shadow standing beside him. Now, they were both frozen. A wave of horror swept over them. Roar looked at Naomi, then back at the badge. His skin was as white as undyed cloth, sweat beginning to break out on his forehead and temples. His mouth opened but no sound came out. FBI, he hissed at last, his voice cracking, trembling, uncontrollable. No, no way. This is fake, right? Riley was even worse. He stood frozen in place, his face drained of color. His hands, the same hands that had cuffed Naomi a moment ago, began to shake violently. He looked at the badge, then at Naomi, then down at his hands. Fear seeped into every fiber of his being. It wasn't just a mistake. They had touched someone they were never supposed to touch. A federal agent. The three officers now understood the terrible consequences of what they had done. They had not only arrested the wrong person, they had illegally arrested an FBI agent. The realization shattered their entire worlds. Every possible consequence began to flash through their minds: job loss, prosecution, even jail time. Roar nearly collapsed before Naomi. His eyes were pleading, his head bowed. The once fiery arrogance of an officer was now nothing but despair. "Agent Sinclair," he stammered. I'm sorry, 1,000 times sorry. It was a misunderstanding. A terrible mistake. We really didn't know who you were." His voice broke, and tears began to fall. Not from sympathy, but from utter fear. He turned back to Riley and Sanchez, shouting as if trying to keep something from falling apart. "What are you two doing standing there? Let them go, untie the agents now." Naomi's voice rang out, sharp and irresistible. "Hurry. Or do you really want to go to jail for obstructing a federal agent?" Riley and Sanchez crouched awkwardly, their hands shaking as they tried to undo the handcuffs. They kept exchanging worried glances, like two students who had just been caught cheating on an exam. The sound of metal clanking echoed through the suffocating silence. The handcuffs tightened, leaving dark red marks on Naomi's wrists. She didn't whine, didn't complain, just watched silently as the two police officers tried desperately to make things right. In a corner of the room, Roar was almost pleading, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. "It's not our fault, it's her, it's that woman. We were misled by false information. Please understand. Please, don't report this, we'll lose everything." Naomi reached forward slowly. When the last pair of handcuffs was removed, she rubbed her wrists gently. The movement was as gentle as a thin blade, and cold as a thin blade. Her face showed no trace of pity. Not because she didn't feel anything, but because she had learned to bury her emotions deep down, like a woman who was used to humiliation and injustice, but never let them win. Not a word. Naomi just stood up straight, carefully adjusted her lopsided vest, then gently took her wallet from Sanchez's hand, her hands were still shaking, and put her badge and ID back into her shirt. Her gaze swept over the three policemen like a cold blade cutting through flesh. Riley swallowed. Sanchez avoided her gaze, while Roar bowed his head. Neither of them dared to say anything more. Naomi didn't shout. There was no need. She knew the silence was as heavy as a sentence. Her composure wasn't a sign of forgiveness, it was power. Naomi pulled out her business phone from her pocket. She didn't need to threaten. She just needed to act. The other three held their breaths, watching her every move as if one more false step would send everything crashing down. They didn't know who she was calling, but that didn't matter, they knew it wouldn't end here. Naomi dialed the number quickly, as if the numbers were in her blood. She pressed the phone to her ear, her voice steady. "This is Agent Naomi Sinclair. I'm at Gate B32, O'Hare International Airport. There's a serious incident that needs immediate attention." Naomi recounted the incident with an uncanny calm, as if her words were carefully measured to avoid straying from the truth. She used no emotion, no embellishment. The facts, Manager Holloway's false accusations, Roar's blatant favoritism, and the three officers' insults, said it all. They had ignored her explanation, ignored the clear evidence Naomi presented, and then had blatantly handcuffed her like a criminal, searched her without a warrant or reason. "Your three officers, Roar, Riley, and Sanchez," Naomi said into the phone, her voice firm, "have committed serious misconduct. I demand that someone with authority come here immediately to deal with it." She ended the call with a clear, steely request. When she hung up, she looked straight at the three men standing before her. Not a word. Not a frown. Naomi's silence was heavier and more intense than any scolding. Her face was cold, her eyes devoid of emotion, leaving the three officers naked before an invisible court. A few minutes later, as Naomi had expected, a man entered the scene in civilian clothes but with an unmistakable air of authority and severity. He was accompanied by two senior officers. It was Chief of Police Michael Thompson. Michael had a stern look, his eyes seemed to see through everything. He and Naomi had probably worked together, or at least known each other through the FBI's joint operations with the local police. As he approached, his eyes lingered on Naomi's face, as if checking to see if she was hurt, then quickly turned to face his three subordinates. There was deep disappointment in his eyes, mixed with barely concealed anger. He didn't need many words. He had understood the whole story from Naomi's brief account, from the three men who were bowing their heads awkwardly. "Agent Sinclair, are you okay?" he asked. Naomi gave a slight nod. "I'm fine, Michael," she replied, her voice still professional, only slightly hoarse from the tension still lingering in her lungs. Thompson turned. His face was steely. "Roar. Riley. Sanchez. Turn over your badges, weapons, and radios immediately." His voice was hard as steel. "All three of you are suspended on the spot, pending an official investigation." No one dared to argue. Thompson didn't need to scream. He was a man who understood the gravity of justice, and the responsibility that came with wearing that uniform. Any wrongdoing, especially by a federal agent like Naomi, was unforgivable. In that moment, there was more than just punishment. It's also a reminder that in law enforcement, arrogance, prejudice, and lack of control can destroy a career, and a person. The officers walked like shadows. The airport lights reflected the silver badges on their shoulders, but there was no glory, only heaviness, heads bowed, trembling. Face down, came a command, not a command but a whisper of fear. The three men, who had once proudly worn their uniforms, were now disarmed, stripped of their authority by their superiors. A chain had broken, and each link fell silently. Superintendent Thompson returned. He didn't need to speak, but his eyes looked at Naomi as if he were taking on some of the guilt she had suffered. His voice was hoarse and heavy as he said, "Naomi. I have no words to do justice to this regret." Agent Sinclair stepped forward, representing the entire Chicago Police Department. He spoke slowly, clearly, as if he wanted to carve each word into the hearts of the witnesses. "On behalf of the entire police department, I sincerely apologize. What happened today was unacceptable. It was a disgraceful act, completely contrary to our values and procedures." He paused, his eyes moving from Naomi to the silent, breathless onlookers. "I promise, there will be a thorough, fair, internal investigation. And we will take appropriate action against all involved." Just then, a security guard rushed over, clutching a worn beige wallet. "Ms. Holloway," he called, his voice faltering. "We just found your wallet. It looks stuck at the bottom of your bag. It may have been obscured by other items." Mrs. Holloway, the woman who had so firmly accused Naomi, stood still. Her hands shook as she took the purse back. She opened it, examining it quickly. It was all there. Nothing missing. Untouched. She looked up at Naomi, there was no anger in her eyes, only deep confusion. And perhaps a little regret. Thompson sighed. Not out of anger, but out of a sense of helplessness in the face of the absurdity of the situation. He turned to Naomi, his voice low and sincere. We'll take you to a quieter place, so you can provide more details for the report. Again, I apologize. Naomi nodded. She didn't smile. But there was determination in her eyes. A truth had been made clear. A measure of justice had been served. But she knew, this story wasn't over. The Chicago Police Department's internal investigation into the incident, involving FBI agent Naomi Sinclair, began in earnest, with urgency. Under the direct supervision of Chief Thompson and representatives from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility, every detail, every testimony was scrutinized. The testimony of Agent Sinclair, a black woman who had steadfastly defended her honor, became central. Not just to the investigation, but to a larger conversation, about faith, about justice, about what was right. The internal investigation into the wrongful arrest of FBI agent Naomi Sinclair produced an overwhelming body of evidence that exposed serious misconduct by three officers, Lieutenant Roar Holloway, Officer Riley, and Officer Sanchez. Throughout, Naomi provided a clear, coherent testimony, backed up by detailed evidence, both factual accounts and video and audio recordings, that demonstrated her innocence and that she was the victim of blatant discrimination, personal bias, and excessive authority on the part of law enforcement. Naomi's detailed account and testimony. Naomi provided 3 separate reports, each so detailed that it was impossible to ignore. In them, she described the time of the approach. She was waiting to meet with a witness in a federal case. There was no disturbance, no suspicious behavior. Roar's initial demeanor, aggressive, arrogant, with clear contempt for her presence, a plainly dressed black woman, in a white neighborhood was unacceptable. Attempts to explain, Naomi showed her FBI identification, tried to explain the purpose of the assignment, but her words were ignored. Brutality and violation of procedure. Instead of performing the identification verification procedure, which is required in any civil interaction, the 3 officers sprang into action, violently handcuffing Naomi without justification. She was shoved to the concrete, while Roar yelled at her that, "We know your kind of people." The racist and sexist comments were not only wrong, but also a clear demonstration of bias and unprofessionalism. The undisputed evidence. The body camera recordings of officers Riley and Sanchez were the most important part of the investigation. They faithfully recorded the entire incident, from the way they approached Naomi, their indifference to her explanation, to the moment when all 3 of them looked visibly panicked when Naomi asked to check her jacket pocket for an FBI badge. When they actually realized that the man they were arresting was a federal agent, their demeanor changed completely, from arrogance to cowardice and pleading not to be reported. Mistakes and evasion of responsibility. During the internal interview, Roar tried to blame the pressure of the job and claimed that his professional instincts had been fooled. Riley and Sanchez, while acknowledging that wrongdoing had occurred, claimed that they were just following orders and did not question the legitimacy of those instructions. Investigation conclusion. The final report of the CPD Internal Affairs Committee clearly concluded that all 3 officers had committed serious violations of professional and ethical standards. These included unlawful detention, racial discrimination, failure to follow verification procedures, abusive language and conduct, infringement on the civil rights of a federal agent. The incident not only severely damaged the reputation of the city police department, but also left Naomi Sinclair in a state of mental instability and sparked a wave of protests in the community. Disciplinary decisions and aftermath. While the investigation was uncontroversial, the final disciplinary decisions from Chief Thompson and the CPD Disciplinary Board did not fully meet the expectations of justice. Many questioned the police union's intervention and formal reform policies that softened the punishment. Roar was demoted and placed on administrative duty. Riley and Sanchez were suspended with pay for 6 months. But in the eyes of the public, and especially Naomi Sinclair, who maintained dignity and principle throughout, the facts were on the record. and her voice could no longer be ignored. While their actions could be considered illegal, even criminal, this time the agency chose a different path. Unlike previous cases, where similar officers were often fired immediately or referred to the Criminal Prosecution Office, this decision had a more constructive and positive direction. Rohr, Riley, and Sanchez, the three officers involved, were not permanently removed from the force. Instead, they received a special form of discipline, a 1-year suspension without pay. This decision was not made to absolve them of responsibility or lessen the consequences, but to give them time to truly reflect, feel the consequences of their actions, and face themselves with awareness. However, this form of discipline did not stop there. After their suspensions, all three were required to attend a special training program, a full year-long program designed specifically for officers who have committed serious violations of professional standards, especially related to bias, abuse of power, and lack of professional skills. The program includes an extensive series of training courses, from updating knowledge of federal and state laws, civil rights, to regulations and limits on police authority. In addition to theory, they also undergo emotional management exercises, learn how to communicate effectively when angry, handle stressful situations using de-escalation techniques, and especially develop skills to communicate respectfully in all situations, with anyone, at any time. A core part of the program is confronting personal biases. They learn about unconscious bias, implicit racism, cultural diversity, not just in theory, but also through group discussions, reflective essays, simulations under the supervision of coaches and psychologists. They don't just learn, they do, through community service, volunteering with the most vulnerable groups in society. This is not just an obligation, but also an opportunity for them to listen, connect, and better understand the true responsibilities of a keeper of order and justice. This is not a forgiving forgiveness. This is a test. A second chance, but a challenging one, requiring real effort. They not only have to relearn what they have forgotten, but also learn things they may not have thought of before. And if they do make it through, not just with grades, but with real change from within, then perhaps for the first time, the system will not just judge, but nurture. Not just punish, but reinstill trust. The afternoon sun poured through the large windows of the FBI headquarters in Chicago, casting pale streaks of light across the polished floor. Agent Naomi Sinclair sat pensively in her office, her hands resting lightly on the report she had just finished reading. It was a dense document documenting the entire investigation into the incident at O'Hare Airport, where 3 police officers, including Riley and Sanchez, had left a stain on the force. She felt a gentle breeze blowing through the half-open window, carrying with it the sounds of the city below. Amid the changing city, Sinclair wrestled with her own emotions. She felt relief, that the truth had come to light, that justice had finally spoken. But deep down, a part of her still harbored doubt. Could the people who had once abused such power really change? Riley and Sanchez no longer carried guns or badges. They were suspended from the force and placed on a year-long probation program called the Initiative for Police Reform and Redemption, IPOR. It was more than just a review. They were required to attend meetings and sit-downs with community leaders, from minority neighborhoods on the South Side to social justice activists in Uptown, from mothers who lost their children to police violence to young men who had been victimized. These conversations, with stares, with tears, with why, were not easy. Riley listened silently at first, his eyes averted. But over the weeks, he began to ask questions, to apologize, to recount moments when he could have chosen differently. Sanchez cried during a meeting with a black father, a man he had pulled out of his car because he had a feeling of doubt. The conversations not only make the community feel heard, but also act as a mirror to their own hearts. Every 3 months, a monitoring board will assess their progress in changing their behavior. Is there real change? Are their words backed up by their actions? If after a year they show clear change and a commitment not to repeat their offenses, they can be considered for reinstatement, but will still be subject to strict supervision for a long time afterwards. Conversely, if they fail to show progress, fail the assessment, or commit any other misconduct, they will be permanently dismissed, with no second chance. The decision has sparked fierce debate within CPD and outside. Some have called it a humane step forward, a reformist approach rather than a punitive one. But there are also concerns that this is just a soft shell for a system that needs to change fundamentally. That those who have done wrong can come back, but is their nature truly changed? Sinclair stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the buildings in the distance, where change, however slow, was taking place. She knew that the journey of justice was never simple. But she also knew that without opening the doors to recovery, every system was just a prison of its own. She was hopeful. But not blind that a year of suspension. A year of retraining. Would that time, with its classes, lectures, and discussions, be enough to erase the racial biases that had been ingrained in someone like Rohr? Would it be enough to make people like Riley and Sanchez, her teammates, courageous enough to question their superiors, and resolute enough to say no to unethical orders? Or was it all just a half measure? A way for the system to avoid really tough decisions like permanent dismissal, or even criminal prosecution? A placation of public anger, a reluctant nod to union pressure. Naomi knew, too well, that if she hadn't been wearing an FBI badge, things would have turned out very differently. She wouldn't have been sent back to the office to write the internal report. She would be handcuffed, taken to the police station, facing serious charges and an arduous legal battle. The badge had saved her. But it had also highlighted the injustice that permeated the system, where justice was not based solely on right and wrong, but on who you were, what you did, and how much power you had. And what about those without a badge? Without a voice? Without a lawyer or a press to defend them? Who would stand up for them when faced with people like Rohr? Naomi was stunned at the thought. Was this form of discipline strong enough to prevent similar incidents in the future? Or was it just a fresh coat of paint covering the rotting cracks within? She turned back to her computer screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard, but her mind was still caught by the image of that airport, an unforgettable experience. It's a cut, painful but necessary, reminding her that the fight isn't over. It also reminds her of why she became an agent. Not just to enforce the law, but to change the system from within. To fight for justice and equality, not just in her job, but in her own life. But deep inside Naomi still has unanswered questions. Has Rohr really changed? Have Riley and Sanchez learned their lesson? Or are they just waiting for the storm of public opinion to pass so things can go back to the way they were? And then there will be another victim. Someone without a badge. Without power. With nothing but fear. Naomi knows the road ahead is long and challenging. But even if it's just one small step each day, she will take it. Because if not her, then who?